Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Latin, and I'm going to be discussing the importance of environmental sustainability in comparison to economic development. For starters, I'd like to pose the thought that you consider we all live on this one planet collectively. Why does society feel the need to gain monetary profit, which is generally temporary, at the expense of more long-term environmental costs? I'll be diving a little bit into the costs, such like deforestation, issues with water conservation, depleted oil reserves, overall climate change, stuff like that. And I'd like to point out that climate is not just temperature, or else they'd call it temperature change, not climate change. There's massive components that are being affected on a global scale, right? I'm sure we all know this. And I'd also like to say I understand the premise of expansion, economic prosperity, suburbanization, stuff like that. And they promote happiness, community, a sense of collectiveness among humans in general. But at what point do we have to say, okay, all right, maybe we should slow down, maybe we should work a little backwards here, try and accommodate to the issues that have been going on here. That being said, I'll dive into why the environment needs more attention than economic development at this point on Earth. And then B, how economic developments are being affected by the environment. So a little bit of vice versa. In Controversies of Globalization, Rinaldi goes on to explain about how the issues of climate change affect every single human on Earth. Whether we're aware of it or not, it affects us. It affects every single person. One example is Bangladesh's land is 80% floodplains. And at the current rate of global warming and the sea level rising, they're going to lose over 20%, almost a fourth of their entire country to rising sea levels. It'll displace over 20 million people in Bangladesh alone. Imagine all the port cities, Seattle, and important places in Japan and in China. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. The main point here is that global warming is something that affects everything, and one of my favorite sources that I found while researching was Vincent Wong's Thermodynamics. It's essentially a book about engineering and thermodynamics in general, but it has a part where it explains how the Earth is essentially like an engine, and there's multiple parts that help, and they all process and work together in one way or another. But essentially, once an engine starts working harder and harder and harder, it builds up heat, obviously. And so what we're dealing with as a planet is an overheating. So when an engine overheats, it essentially dies and it doesn't work anymore, right? And so what Vincent Wong likes to kind of elaborate on is we're working too hard in the sense that we're emitting too much heat. We're not preserving the environment as much as we should. Components like that contribute to a depleting ozone, increased temperatures, and other components like that, which are affecting the rising sea levels, the melting ice caps, other components that have been affected through global warming and other environmental issues. One of the main takeaways from the research I did was the reason we're overheating and having so many environmental issues is because there's too much happening. There's too much human activity, deforestation, building new cities, the goal of essentially economic development. And I did some research, and there's books in 1971, Thomas Jukes, 1972, R.H. Pritchard, a couple other books, but they're all essentially pointing to overpopulation. Two of the books I named were named overpopulation. So one of the main components that go into the economic or environmental disparity we're feeling now is due to the economic development that we kind of have strived for. And it's good that we're advancing as a society and we're growing and expanding, but we're definitely reaching some sort of apex where there's no longer really a lot of room to grow or a lot of room to expand environmentally, due to the fact that we've been working so hard and there's been so many numbers contributing to the drilling, development, etc., stuff like that. That being said, I'd like to propose. I don't really have any sort of revolutionary alternative, but what can be done is for starters, voting in the right people to office. The fact that our president doesn't recognize global warming as a issue is is concerning to say the least. If not one of the major issues we're dealing with as a planet. So what I can recommend is voting in the right people, doing your due diligence on who represents what, how they feel about the environment and policies like that, and then just everyday activities that you do, recycling your water bottles, maybe trying to reuse plastic. If you can, maybe carpool, try and get a car that emits less. There's a lot of little things that don't seem like they're crucial, but when the enough people do it and with the right amount, we can't work backwards here. The planet's warming up, but what we can do is slow down the process, and that would essentially be the goal: to do as much as possible, little by little, step by step, just to try and counter some of the effects, the hurricanes that we can't predict, the wildfires because it's too dry. Um, there's things that we can do to help contribute. It's not going to be night and day. It's not going to be revolutionary. Um, but I do believe, as a whole, we can make progress. We can make steps forward that will help band-aid our planet. And with all that being said, it's been a pleasure. I thank you so much for listening. My name is Jonathan Latin again. I appreciate your time. You have a great day now.